All right, so we're talking about advanced automation services today and what automation can do for you. So when we look at automation, we're thinking about how many times do you go through the process of actually, changing a status, setting a tag, sending out forms. That's multiple steps in your hiring process, even in your post-hire process, even in your internal processes that, they might take seconds to do. But certainly, if you didn't have to do that multiple times throughout the day over, multiple candidates, it certainly can save you time and give you back a little bit of that day so that you can focus on things that are a little bit more important to you. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about automation. It's going to significantly reduce the time that it takes to complete the workflow and removing the potential for any human error. So once you have automation involved, it goes ahead and takes over that particular process and makes things just a little bit more simpler for you from that standpoint. So what can it do? It can trigger flag issues. It can schedule classes. It can notify key employees. It can set tags, change statuses, and perform calculations. So think about what steps you go through as I'm talking through this presentation today. Everything that you do you have to send a manual email? Do you have to follow up on certain things? Are things hitting your checklist? Are you using checklists? Are drivers able to upload certain information that just automatically sets a tag for you without you having to do that yourself? Think about that process as we go through, because we're going to talk about 3 specific examples, but it's much bigger than 3 specific examples. So our first example that we want to talk about is driver engagement. Really keeping that driver engaged in that hiring process. The moment that you lose a connection with them, they're talking to someone else. So engagement is a really big deal, or we think it's a really big deal. We think you guys do as well. And the more that they buy into that specific process, the more likely or less likely they are to back out. So kind of keep that in mind. The more engagement, the more connection points with that candidate is going to keep them more engaged with your process. So an example of that would be, say you have, certain statuses within your system, and we're all customizable. Everyone has different statuses. You need to send out video training. You need to get that complete. So the driver receives that, notifies the recruiter. Maybe there's an automated email that goes out from the recruiter asking the driver, did you have any questions? Was there any input you had to that video that you just reviewed and that form that you just completed? And once all of those steps have taken place and the training is complete, the status automatically changes. You're not going in there and changing it, or you can actually set the status and fire off different events based on the status that you've sent. So kind of keep that in mind with different opportunities that you can do just by using those status fields and it firing off a different type of workflow and automation throughout the process. You could also have a different status of maybe pre-approved. They're really getting to the point where we want them to get close to orientation, but there's a few things we need. We can notify the driver to please upload their CDL. They upload it, notifies you, lets you know what's going on, keeps you in the loop. Then, the next step is we want you to go ahead and complete the certificate of violations. And then that violations certificate is completed as well. Automatically, still the workflow goes into your document section and your different categories there. But again, once you initiate changes with your statuses, that workflow starts firing off. So it's not 5 different buttons that you're hitting throughout the day. It's 1 different button. Another one for orientation. So we have people that, thank you for joining us. We can't wait to see you at orientation. You're scheduled for this location on this date, and here is your information. There might be forms that they need to complete. What if you want to send them information about where they're scheduled to take their drug test? That can be integrated into this automation workflow. What if there's surveys? How was your orientation? How was the person that presented? What about operations versus safety? Any questions that you have? Any feedback that you have to improve our orientation process? Those again can fire out automatically. We can use drip marketing and we can use several other types of opportunities to move that forward. Again, it keeps you connected with that individual, that engagement. That's a really, really important part of the pre-hire process. And it helps you manage the benchmarks and the mile markers as you're going through that hiring situation. Then you can start talking to that individual or having automated emails and correspondence going out about referral incentives. If you refer someone, you can go ahead and get X amount of money over X amount of period of time, and that all becomes automated. It becomes a recruiter assistant, so to speak, as you walk through that. So a second reality is issues and surveys. So now we're getting a little bit more into the post-hire process. Once you've got them hired, it's all about retention. We all know that, the cost of a candidate acquisition is a lot higher than trying to actually retain a driver that we already have in our possession. So an engaged driver is a happy driver, and that makes you money, while an unhappy driver is probably not as productive. They're seeking out other opportunities. So we want to offer, opportunities out there for you to stay engaged through. Do you have an issue with your vehicle? Automate that process and let you know and alert certain groups within your organization to that vehicle issue. Or if they have an issue with a certain load, or, how was your first paycheck after you started with us? Surveys and giving people a holistic view across the platform as to what that driver's behavior is, so that you know what things you need to change and what you don't need to change in your retention process. Again, making that all an automated process. So, for example, if you have issues with payroll, so the driver responds to automated processes that say, I have an issue with my paycheck. That automatically will go out to your payroll team and alert them to that particular process, so that they're aware of how to fix it and what they need to do to fix it, and give you mile markers, again, to understand and reporting mechanisms of how to measure where you might have issues within your organization when it comes to retention. Again, issues with equipment, that's going to go directly to those people who can address the equipment issues. Again, issues with management, that's going to go to certain people that have control over being able to articulately answer that driver when it comes to issues that are reported. Reality number 3 is the safety audit. So now we're talking a little bit about safety. So this is more internal. What do you have to go through as a carrier to make sure the person that you just hired, that just completed orientation and is now working for you, actually complies with the driver qualification file or any other safety criteria that you have above and beyond a driver qualification file? So we can do safety audits. We can create forms that measure, do we have a CDL and is it clear? Do we have a medical card and is it acceptable? Do we have a copy of the driver's license, the CDL, and it's legible? All of those items that you need to go through to ensure that you're complying with FMCSA when it comes to a driver qualification file. And our program, the automation part of it, will tell you how many times you went through that audit. It'll automatically set a tag and tell you, I've been through an audit with this person 1 time. I've been through it 2 times because I was missing the MVR. I went through it a 3rd time because now I've received their civ list and I have issues. I went through it a 4th time. So there's calculations that can automatically be set in the tag based on point values that you may be assigned to each of that criteria, and also how many iterations you have gone through with that safety audit. So here's a way to kind of look at it, the step 1 in processing any of your safety issues. You can complete it, the first time I have the disclosure form. The next time I did the audit, I have a copy of the DAC report and I have a copy of the disclosure and so forth. The 3rd time it's complete. I have everything that I need to make sure that this driver is on board, that I'm staying accurate throughout, the next year, the annual reviews and the certificate of violations. I'm making sure that all of those items are complete. And it'll give you a good idea as to how you're managing that audit process internally. Here's a good example too, by clicking the Save button. So every time you hit the Save button, it's like an internal form. So for those of you who are using internal forms today, it can go ahead and do the calculations for you, auto set the tags. It triggers events, multiple events behind the scenes so that you don't have to. So the forms updates to the most recent version. So you can see this up here, number of deficiencies. Maybe I have 3 things missing from my DQF file. That's going to be notated here. How many times have I done my audit? 6 times. Does that person have a bus ticket, you know, for coming in for orientation? Any of those types of things can be applied tracking options that go along with your internal process of making sure that that driver remains safe. Other realities and examples. So we gave you 3, but there is so much more that you can do with automation, and that's why we have Carlo on the phone. So don't forget to go ahead and start submitting your questions. He's dealt a lot with automation and helping clients come to a more beneficial process with automation. So definitely start submitting your questions. Leah will start asking those here in a little bit. But you can have validated checklists. You can have subject scoring after the app submission. So maybe you do scoring with your apps and they have 100, but after you've talked to them, you want to bump them up 50 points because the interview went so well, or there was information that took place during that interview that explained something on a criminal background check or on an MVR. You can conduct complex application routing. You want this zip code to go to this person. You want this zip code, and this zip code to go to 3 different people. You want all of this complex routing to happen, you know, maybe based on job recs, maybe based on something else. So that becomes a part of it as well. And then calculated or computed fields. So again, internal forms, external forms that need to create a value and automatically calculate. You're not sitting there saying, this person had a criminal event happen 18 years ago. You don't have to sit there and come up with that calculation. The automation will compute those fields for you, set a tag, interact with the safety audit report. There's all kinds of things that can happen from that standpoint. So we're ready for questions. Again, we don't like to take much of your time. We know how busy you guys are going into the weekend. So we're going to go ahead and start with questions. So Leah, I'm going to turn it over to you and Carlo at this point.
Okay, we're still waiting for some questions to come in.
All right, perfect. So I can ask, you know, I'm curious about a few things. Carlo, I know you deal with this a little bit more than I do, but what experience have you had? I know you've spoken with some of our clients about automation and, you know, trying to simplify that process. Has it really saved them time?
Yeah, it absolutely does, Haley, and thanks for asking. Some of the, I think you touched on a lot of the great points, but particularly with regard to automating communication on the front end to keep drivers engaged, that's been something that a lot of carriers are trying to work toward, to make sure that, you know, once they spend the money on the front end for marketing to get a driver to apply or to get that lead so that they can try to talk the driver into applying, once they have that application, to not lose his interest, and they do use automation in conjunction with some other pieces of other ways we offer to communicate with drivers to make that happen in an automated fashion every step along the way.
Do you ever come across situations, maybe Carlo, where, you know, people are using multiple platforms and this helps consolidate from multiple platform standpoints? You know, so maybe there's various different ways, you know, payroll's involved in a different classification, that maybe we can auto set tags that shoot off emails over to payroll, even though it's a completely different system, just to alert them, hey, this person's been hired. You know, I could imagine that happening as well.
Absolutely, that's something that could take place. You know, we have the ability to send out notifications upon events triggering. So even if it's somebody who's not in Tenstreet on a daily basis, ways to alert them that, hey, this you know, this bonus is due to someone, or this person's been hired, or, you know, that there's something that they need to give attention to. Yeah, there's almost infinite possibilities, to be quite honest with you.
So what I advise, if you think automation might help you, is, put a piece of paper next to you, a sticky note, whichever, and document. Just put little slash marks each time you have to change a tag, each time you're changing a status, each time that you're maybe declining someone and you automatically want an adverse action letter to go out. Think about where automation comes into play, because it's not limited to the 3 things that we talked about today. It's your imagination, quite honestly. If it can be automated within our system, if there's a tag that can be set, if there's something that can be computed, if something can automatically change and fire off all of this workflow, how much time does that save you? And would it be helpful? If so, contact your advisor or call our telephone number and speak with individuals about how that might benefit your organization. Before we go, Leah, did you have any other questions show up?
Yeah, a couple came up. So we've got somebody asking just to please kind of talk a little bit more about validating a checklist and what that means.
Okay. So for those of you that have checklists, and I highly recommend that you have checklists, it's in the app view. So when an application comes in, you can actually click on the arrow if you have checklists today, and it will show your checklist. So say that, there's information that you want to validate through that checklist. I want to make sure I have the CDL. I want to make sure that an email has went out to that individual. I want to make sure that the CDL has been uploaded. It's kind of keeping that all connected together and executing a validation process. Now that this thing's come in, fire off an alert to you. Now the CDL has come in, the checklist is only missing 2 or 3 more items. There's really custom reports. They could be all color-coded, showing exactly what's red and green through all of your checklists and holistically across the board. That can be presented and scheduled as a report that's emailed out to everybody so that you're aware for Jane Doe or John Doe, these are the 3 things that are missing before we can move to the next step in the hiring process. And once all of those are done, it certainly, fire off the next step within your process of hiring. Okay, Leah?
Okay, and then here's an interesting question that is somebody's asking if we have any tips on balancing engaging versus over-engaging.
With your, I don't think I have any tips with that. I will tell you, because everyone probably on this call knows that I work a lot with drip marketing. So, how do we engage the driver with drip? How do we keep them entertained with drip? So that's more of a marketing initiative. There is a rhyme and reason to connecting too much with an individual. If drip is going out, if an automated email is going out, if the recruiter is calling, if the recruiter is texting, the driver might get a little overwhelmed with having that many points of contact. That's why we're talking about, simplifying it and automating it and being able to measure how that helps in particular. I don't think you can ever stay too in contact with a driver, though. I mean, yeah, with email, perhaps, with texting, all of those things show your expression of interest, just like they showed an expression of interest with coming to you first. Once they're hired, I just love to stay connected with drivers. I think, again, that cost of training, hiring, going through the recruiting process, advertising, and filling your pipeline up because people are walking out the door on the back end, I don't think you can communicate enough in that particular situation. Whether you have little town hall meetings that you hold once a month, podcasts, those types of things that go out to your existing drivers, whether you're using drip and our automated processes to really connect and get feedback, because that's going to tell you where you might have problems within your organizations or where you're excelling in your organization. So I don't think you can stay too connected, especially in the post-hire process, pre-hire. I think you need to nurture. It's more of a nurturing process to bring that person along, get things completed, and free up your recruiters to get that person actually hired. Okay, Leah?
That's it for now. We've just had a couple questions there, and that was good that you had some time to ask Carlo for more of a deeper insight on that side too. So
Yeah, absolutely. So Leah, Carlo, do you guys have anything else to add before we let these folks go today?
Haley, I would, and it would just be to add to the point you were just making about, can you over engage? I think that as long as it's meaningful content and it's not just spam type communication, I don't think you can. And the way that we've seen this used so far is to bring that person closer and to sort of allow the drivers, like especially on the front end, as they become closer to orientation date, to automatically send out paperwork for the drivers to complete ahead of time, watch videos ahead of time, and take tests ahead of time to shorten that orientation, that time they spend at orientation, and reduce the orientation costs. So it's all meaningful communication, and it's meaningful to the driver in that they're going to be in the truck sooner, making money sooner. It's meaningful to the carrier because you guys are going to be saving money by not having them at orientation as long and having them out driving sooner. And so I think as long as you're sending good content, I don't think there's a way to do that. And I think the fact that you can get reporting on along the way that shows of the various steps that you've asked a driver who's scheduled for orientation to complete, you can sort of see red light, green light, what they have accomplished. It gives your recruiters who want to be making phone calls to people, hey, this guy has not been very engaged with us. He is set to come to orientation. This is the guy who's probably in jeopardy of no-showing me. So it gives you a barometer of who your recruiters need to be spending their time on the phone with to ensure that they're actually going to show up.
That's a great point to bring up. Frivolous emails going out, frivolous conversations. What we really want to do is keep drivers engaged and stay with us. We really do want them to stay. So meaningful content like Carlo was talking about, just connecting, letting them know that you care and that you're involved and you're engaged in the process just as much as they're engaged in you by applying with you in the first place. Definitely, means a lot. Our point with automation is if we can simplify it, make it easier, and there's not 5 different buttons that you have to click to make this happen, then it's almost like having, an administrative assistant per recruiter to help through that process. So we do thank you guys for joining today. We really do appreciate your time. The recorded version should come out in about a couple of hours, so feel free to go ahead and circulate that to the rest of your team. If you have any questions, please reach out to your advisor or contact us, and we hope you guys do have a good rest of your week and upcoming weekend. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.